And we've seen just this week, the impact that this network can have if we combine our forces together. We accidentally gave you the wrong number for the Boy Scout headquarters, and it was you called a private business. It was a typo in the information that we had here on Focal Point. But the CEO of that company contacted us and says, please make a correction here. Congratulations on the size of your listening audience. We're being overwhelmed. Our customers can't get through to us. Please, please, please make an on-air correction. Of course, we did just as soon as we realized that we had a typo going. But here is just the listening audience of Focal Point, just this one program on AFR Talk shutting down a private business because there are so many of you that care about what's going on in our culture and that answer the call to arms. You've got the same opportunity if you're a mom, same opportunity to do that with 1millionmoms.com. Encourage you to go there. I want to shift gears just a little bit in the last few minutes of this segment. I want to talk about Rand Paul in 2016 just for a moment. I shared some of my reflections with you earlier in this week. I interviewed Senator Paul on Wednesday. Now, there's no question that Senator Paul is running for president in 2016. In fact, the email address of the staff member with whom I corresponded to set up his interview was at Rand Paul 2016. That's a campaign website address. So he's running. His hat is in the ring. Maybe not officially, but there's no question that that's where he's headed. So the question is, for those of us who are conservatives, is he the guy? That's the question that we need to ask. Now, I had 5 concerns going into my conversation with Senator Paul. 5 questions I wanted to get an answer to. And of the 5 questions that I had for Senator Paul, I got satisfactory answers on 3 of them, but not on the other 2. And I wanted to kind of walk you through that very briefly. I was concerned, or I wanted to get confirmation about the sanctity of human life. I'm satisfied that his bona fides are impeccable there. He spoke at the March for Life this year, would have spoken last year, except he got tied up by the TSA on his way to the March for Life. So there's no question that Senator Paul is with us on the sanctity of human life. And, that in reality is probably the single most important issue. I mean, that and where you stand on the issue of homosexuality are the 2 most important issues on the landscape. And so that's an absolute requirement for me. I'm not going to support anybody, period, who is not willing to work for the sanctity of human life. And Senator Paul passes that test. Now, he's also a fiscal conservative. Nobody doubts that. We talked about the fact that if we don't raise the debt ceiling, we got a balanced budget by the end of that day. He's enthusiastic about that idea. He will vote against raising the debt ceiling unless there is a balanced budget amendment attached to it. So he's a guy that's concerned and will do something as president about out-of-control spending. When he says it, you can believe it. And he's a true friend of Israel. He just was over to Israel, strengthened his ties with the leadership in Israel. He said openly that an attack on Israel is an attack on the United States. He was the one that authored this bill. It didn't succeed yesterday, but he authored a bill to prevent the sale of F-16s to Egypt. The president of Egypt is out there saying that the Jews are descendants of apes and pigs. One of his prominent aides said in 2010 that the Holocaust is a fiction, that what actually happened is the Jews all migrated to the United States in World War II. And Rand Paul says, look, these represent a threat to Israel. I don't think we ought to do it. But I've got problems with the stand on marriage. Now, Rand Paul was very good on the importance of protecting state sovereignty to deal with the issue of marriage. He wants to protect the right of states to define marriage for themselves. Kentucky has a marriage amendment in its state constitution. He supports it. Now, the problem is that he does not support, or could not, or would not, on this program at least, support the part of DOMA that defines marriage for federal purposes as the union of one man and one woman. I found him elusive and evasive when I was pressing him on the issue of the Defense of Marriage Act and the federal definition of marriage. Now, again, this is critical because if the federal government's going to hire people, if they're going to pay them wages, if they're going to provide benefits for spouses, then we've got to know who qualifies for those benefits. What is the federal definition of a spouse for the purpose of federal benefits? And so I found that unsatisfactory. I believe it's going to be imperative that when the time comes, we're prepared to move on a federal marriage amendment to get some consistency and some uniformity on our policy on marriage. We're getting a patchwork deal. It's creating huge problems with custody and divorce issues from one state to the next. And I think we're going to need a uniform policy because this is the cornerstone of civilization. Now, that's going to require a federal marriage amendment. Now, Rand Paul might argue that that's contrary to states' rights, but that is the greatest expression of states' rights you can get, because you cannot amend our Constitution unless you can get 37 states to agree. Amending the Constitution is the ultimate expression of states' rights. Now, the fifth question, and this is again where I found his answer somewhat unsatisfactory, was on immigration. Now, what Rand Paul, here's the problem. Rand Paul believes in amnesty, just like Senator Rubio does, and just like the Amnesty 8 does. But Rand Paul says, no, what we got to have, first of all, we've got to have votes, maybe for up to 5 years in a row, get a report from an independent source, an inspector general, not from the hacks at the administration, but an independent source that verifies that the border's secure. We need to vote on that and agree with this report that the borders are secure for 5 years before we do anything about legalization. But at that point, Senator Paul would be in favor, from what I gathered, would be in favor of instant legalization of every illegal alien in the country. And I find a real problem with that. I think that's a major compromise with the principle of the rule of law and equality under the law. So I give Rand Paul 3.5 stars out of 5. Should he be on the short list for 2016? Yes. Should he be at the top? No. Focal Point AFR Talk.